Hey guys, tonight we are going to talk about the perfect 1950s housewife and why she was probably much more tired than the advertisements ever wanted anyone to notice. And if you are watching this late at night, maybe with your room half dark, maybe with your phone a little too close to your face, maybe with some small chore still waiting somewhere in the kitchen or the laundry basket, this is one of those topics that might feel strangely familiar. Because most of us know that quiet little feeling of being surrounded by things that are technically done for comfort, but somehow still become work. A clean kitchen is comforting, until you are the person expected to keep it clean every single day. A made bed is comforting, until it becomes proof that you are a responsible person. A pleasant home is comforting, until the whole world decides that your worth can be measured by whether the hallway smells fresh, whether the children look brushed, whether dinner is on time, and whether you are still smiling when everyone else walks through the door. So get comfortable if you can. Lower the brightness a little, let your shoulders drop, and we will drift back into a very polished, very pastel, very carefully arranged version of American life, where the floors were waxed, the refrigerators gleamed, the curtains were clean, and the woman at the center of it all was expected to make exhaustion look effortless. And if you end up liking this sort of strange, quiet history, you can subscribe if you want to, but only if it feels useful to have one more calm place to come back to at night. The strange thing about the 1950s home is that it was sold as a kind of paradise. After the war, after years of rationing and uncertainty and cramped city apartments and postponed marriages, the suburban house seemed to promise a softer life. A driveway, a lawn, a washing machine if the family could afford one, a kitchen with rounded chrome handles, colored appliances, bright cabinets, and enough counter space to make daily life feel modern. Magazines and advertisements kept showing this world as if it had solved something ancient. Here was the new home, with its electric mixers, its packaged foods, its shiny vacuum cleaners, its cheerful curtains, and its carefully dressed woman standing in the middle of it, somehow both relaxed and busy, useful and decorative, modern and obedient. The kitchen was no longer just a hot room where food was made. It was now a little stage for national confidence. It said that the family had made it. It said that the husband was doing well. It said that the children were being raised properly. It said that America itself was clean, efficient, abundant, and bright. And because the home carried all of that meaning, the housewife carried it too. Her work was more than work. It was atmosphere. It was reputation. It was proof. If the kitchen was messy, it did not simply mean that breakfast had happened. It could mean that she was falling behind. If the laundry was late, it did not simply mean the hamper was full. It could mean that she was disorganized. If the children looked untidy, it did not simply mean they had been playing. It could mean that she was careless. And if she looked tired, openly tired, unhidden tired, then something about the whole performance began to crack. Of course, not every woman lived inside this image in the same way. Some women worked outside the home because the family needed the money. Some women were single, widowed, divorced, or living in arrangements that did not fit the magazine picture. Some families could not afford the new appliances that advertisements treated as normal. And in many homes with more money, some of the hardest domestic work was passed along to paid help, often to women whose own exhaustion did not appear in the shiny version of suburban success. So, when we talk about the perfect 1950s housewife, we are not talking about every woman in the decade. We are talking about an ideal, a very powerful ideal, the woman in the advertisement, the woman in the advice column, the woman in the smiling kitchen photograph, the woman who appeared again and again as proof that a good life could be arranged around a clean house, obedient children, a working husband, and a wife who somehow had no visible anger, no visible boredom, and no visible need for rest. That ideal mattered because even women who did not fully live it could still feel judged by it. It hovered over the home like wallpaper, quiet, repeating, hard to escape, and like wallpaper it did not need to shout. It was there when she opened a magazine at the kitchen table. It was there in the appliance advertisement, where a smiling woman seemed delighted by a refrigerator shelf. It was there in the advice column, where the answer to unhappiness was often better organization, better meals, and better attitude. The ideal taught women to examine the home the way a supervisor might examine a workplace. Was the breakfast routine smooth enough? Was the hall closet orderly enough? Were the children's drawers sensible? Was the husband's morning made easier by some quiet preparation the night before? Even the calendar could become part of the house. Monday for laundry, Tuesday for ironing, Wednesday for heavier cleaning, Thursday for shopping, Friday for preparing for the weekend, as if Saturday and Sunday were not rest exactly, but a small inspection period when family, neighbors, and unexpected guests might confirm whether the whole system was working. There is a sleepy absurdity to that idea. A home that was supposed to be a private shelter could become a place where every room kept office hours. So the first exhausting thing about being the perfect 1950s housewife was that the job began before the day did. Not always in a dramatic way, not with some great tragedy. More often it began with small ordinary sounds, the soft click of a bedroom door, the water running in the bathroom, the faint hum of a refrigerator in the kitchen, the cold feeling of linoleum under bare feet. Before anyone had properly woken up, there were already little domestic calculations moving through the house. Coffee, breakfast, lunches, shirts, shoes, the milk bottle, the cereal box, the eggs, the pan, the toast, the children who needed to be woken gently or not so gently, depending on how late the morning had become. And then there was the body of the housewife herself, which also had to be prepared. She was not supposed to emerge into the day looking like a person who had been sleeping. The ideal was not simply to do the work, it was to appear ready for the work, pleasant inside the work, almost naturally designed for it. Hair brushed or set, face washed, maybe lipstick, maybe powder, a house dress, an apron, stockings if the day required leaving the house, and a careful little arrangement of the self that turned a private woman into a public symbol, even if she never left the kitchen. There is something quietly exhausting about that. The idea that even your tiredness must be made presentable. And then the kitchen began. The 1950s kitchen is easy to romanticize because it photographs so well. Pastel cabinets, chrome trim, a clock on the wall, patterned curtains, a table with metal legs, a refrigerator that looks almost cheerful. Everything shaped by the promise that the future would be clean and convenient. But inside that cheerful room, the work kept arriving. Breakfast was more than breakfast. It was timing. It was nutrition. It was economy. It was the husband's schedule and the children's moods and the dishes waiting immediately afterward. It was wiping the counter before crumbs became evidence. It was rinsing glasses. It was remembering who liked eggs and who refused them. It was listening for the school bus or watching the clock or packing lunch in wax paper with the half-aware pressure that a child's lunchbox could carry the reputation of the home into the classroom. The kitchen was called modern, but it was also a command center. And command centers are not restful places. Even convenience had a strange way of creating more standards. Processed foods, canned foods, boxed mixes, gelatin salads, frozen vegetables, cake mixes, instant coffee, and packaged desserts all promised relief. And sometimes they really did help. They shortened some tasks. They made meals more predictable. They made it possible to serve variety without starting everything from scratch. But they also created new expectations. Now the good housewife was not simply supposed to cook, she was supposed to be clever with convenience. She was supposed to make the canned peaches look intentional. She was supposed to turn a box into something personal. She was supposed to make a meal seem effortless but not lazy. Modern but not careless. Economical but not cheap. Pretty but not wasteful. This is one of the quieter traps of domestic life. When a tool saves time, the saved time does not always become rest. Sometimes it becomes a higher standard. The cake mix does not mean you can sit down. It means there is now time to frost the cake more neatly. The washing machine does not mean the laundry disappears. It means the laundry can be done more often, the sheets can be cleaner, the collars can be brighter, and the towels can be folded with the edges aligned. The vacuum cleaner does not mean the floor no longer matters. It means dust has fewer excuses. And in a culture that treated the home as the woman's natural kingdom, every new appliance quietly expanded the borders of that kingdom. Machines were supposed to free her, but they also made it harder to explain why she was tired. If there was an electric mixer, a washing machine, a vacuum cleaner, a refrigerator, an iron, a toaster, and packaged food on the shelf, then what exactly was the problem? That question itself was part of the problem. Because the work of a home was never only the heavy lifting. It was the noticing, the remembering, and the small corrections made before anyone else saw a problem. It was knowing that the milk was low before it was gone, knowing that the clean towels would not last through the weekend, knowing that one child needed new socks and another hated the crust on sandwiches, and the good tablecloth had a stain that might be hidden if the centerpiece sat in exactly the right place. It was mental work wrapped inside physical work, and because it happened silently, it could be mistaken for instinct. As if a woman naturally knew the state of every drawer, as if she naturally remembered the school form, the neighbor's visit, the thawing meat, the missing button, and the cupboard shelf that needed wiping before anyone saw it. But nothing about that was automatic. It was labor that had learned to whisper. It is easy to imagine the housewife moving through the morning with a kind of mechanical grace. She clears breakfast, she wipes the table, she rinses dishes, she checks the stove, she puts food away, she sweeps whatever is already gathered on the floor. She notices the fingerprints near the doorframe, the toothpaste in the sink, the small sock under the chair that has been pushed slightly out of place, the ashtray that needs emptying, the beds that need making, the laundry that has become its own weather system somewhere in the house. Nothing is terrible. That is part of what makes it tiring. It is all small. It is all ordinary. It is all technically manageable. And yet it arrives in such steady layers that the day fills itself before she has chosen anything. Cleaning in the 1950s carried moral weight. A clean home suggested a clean character. A polished floor suggested discipline. White laundry suggested competence. A shining bathroom suggested respectability. Dust was more than dust. Dust was a little accusation settling on the furniture. Women's magazines and household guides could turn cleaning into a form of pride, but pride can become a very heavy thing when it is required every day. There were daily tasks, weekly tasks, seasonal tasks, and the kinds of invisible tasks that never appeared on any list because they were too constant to name. The bathroom had to be kept presentable. The kitchen had to be reset after every meal. Beds had to be made. Children had to be watched. Floors had to be swept, carpets had to be vacuumed, laundry had to be sorted and washed and dried and ironed and put away. Surfaces had to be dusted, windows had to be considered, groceries had to be planned, meals had to be stretched, guests had to be anticipated, husbands had to be kept comfortable, neighbors had to be quietly impressed, or at least not given anything to talk about. And the house itself seemed to watch her. The sink watched, the hamper watched, the stove watched, the stove watched, the bathroom mirror watched. The bathroom mirror watched. The front window watched, because the front window faced the street, and the street held other houses, and other houses held other women, who also knew exactly what a good home was supposed to look like. This is where the exhaustion becomes social. It was not enough to survive the work privately. The work had to be visible in the right ways and invisible in the right ways. The house should look clean, but not as though someone had been frantically cleaning. Dinner should appear on time, but not as though it had consumed the afternoon. Children should look cared for, but not overmanaged. The wife should look pleasant, but not vain. The home should look prosperous, but not showy. Everything had to seem natural, and very little of it was natural. There were also the children, who were loved and difficult and inconvenient in the ordinary ways children have always been inconvenient. The polished family image depended on them looking clean, respectful, and happy enough to reflect well on the home. Their clothes mattered. Their manners mattered. Their school lunches mattered. Their haircuts, missing mittens, permission slips, report cards, and small public moods all seemed to travel back to the mother in some invisible line of responsibility. A child with a dirty collar could suggest neglect. A child who talked back could suggest poor discipline. A child who seemed too quiet could suggest some private failure of warmth. This was a heavy way to love someone, not because love itself was the burden, but because love had been tied so tightly to presentation. The mother was expected to be patient without looking permissive, firm without looking cold, and attentive without looking anxious. She was supposed to create childhood memories and keep childhood from making too much mess in the good room. So toys were gathered, milk was poured, tears were wiped, small arguments were softened before the husband came home. And somewhere in the middle of that, she was still supposed to remain a person with a pleasant voice, a neat waist, and no visible resentment toward the cereal crushed into the carpet. Laundry alone could take over a day if you let yourself think about it too long. Even with improved machines becoming more common, laundry remained physical, repetitive, and strangely intimate. It meant handling the evidence of everyone else's body. Socks stiff with use, children's clothes with grass or food or schoolyard dirt, shirts with collars that needed special attention, sheets that had to be lifted, shaken, dried, folded, and stored, towels that seemed to multiply in damp little piles. Then came ironing. Ironing is one of those old domestic tasks that looks peaceful from a distance and becomes absurd up close. The board unfolded. The iron warmed. The fabric hissed faintly under steam or heat. Sleeves had to be turned. Collars had to be flattened. Seams had to be respected. A husband's shirt could become a small white test of devotion, pressed smooth so that he could leave the house looking professionally cared for by someone else's time. There is a particular loneliness in that kind of work. The person who wears the shirt is visible. The person who ironed it disappears. And still, by mid-morning, there might be a satisfaction to it. That is important too. The goal is not to imagine every housewife as secretly miserable every second of the day. Many women took real pride in making a home, feeding a family, caring for children, creating order, and building beauty out of routine. Pride and exhaustion can live in the same room. In fact, they often do. The trouble was that pride was expected to be enough. If the work was tiring, she should be grateful. If she was lonely, she should remember she had a home. If she wanted something else, she should perhaps buy a new tablecloth, try a new recipe, join a club, improve her attitude, or rest later. Later is one of the most dangerous words in domestic life. Rest later, sit down later, think later, be yourself later. But later kept moving. By late morning or early afternoon, the grocery list might begin to form. Shopping in the 1950s was changing. The supermarket was becoming a central part of American life, replacing smaller daily stops for many families and turning food buying into a bright self-service ritual of choice. A woman could push a cart through aisles full of boxes, cans, jars, cereals, powdered mixes, sauces, sliced breads, and frozen possibilities, all arranged as if abundance itself had been domesticated. The supermarket promised freedom, but it also asked her to choose correctly. The good housewife had to balance price, taste, nutrition, novelty, family preference, husband's approval, children's complaints, magazine recipes, and the quiet desire not to seem behind the times. And the supermarket was not a quiet place, even when nothing dramatic happened there. There were carts and labels, and women reaching for the same shelf. There were children asking for cereal. There was the small calculation of whether a cheaper brand would be noticed. There was the mild embarrassment of putting something back. A woman could feel seen by what she bought, as if the checkout line were reading the contents of her week. The store offered abundance, but abundance asks questions. Practical or modern, familiar or new, cheap enough to be responsible, but not so cheap that anyone noticed. All of that could fit inside a cart beneath a folded purse and a pair of tired hands. Too much convenience could look lazy. Too little convenience could look old-fashioned. Too much spending could look irresponsible. Too much thrift could look like failure. Even a cart full of groceries could become a little biography. Imagine her under the fluorescent lights, moving slowly through the aisle, with the cart wheels clicking against the floor. A can of pineapple, a box of cake mix, a packet of gelatin, ground beef, lettuce, white bread, coffee, cereal, cream soup. Maybe something new she saw in a magazine. Maybe something her husband will like. Maybe something the children will actually eat. Maybe something that will make dinner look more cheerful than she feels. It is a very specific kind of tiredness, the tiredness of making endless small choices for other people, and then bringing those choices home, putting them away, planning what they will become, and remembering that every meal is temporary. This is another quiet cruelty of housework. Most of it disappears almost immediately. A meal is cooked, served, eaten, and then it becomes dishes. A floor is cleaned, walked on, and then it asks to be cleaned again. A shirt is ironed, worn, and returned to the hamper. A bed is made, slept in, and unmade by morning. The work is real, but its proof keeps vanishing. By afternoon, the house might enter that strange suspended time before everyone returns. The light changes, the kitchen cools, the living room sits waiting. There may be a moment, just a moment, when the house is almost still. The sort of stillness that looks like rest from the outside, but from inside feels more like preparation. This may have been the loneliest part of the day. Not always sad exactly, just quiet in a way that could make a person aware of herself. The children were not there for a few hours, or they were napping, or they were somewhere else in the house. The husband was away, the neighbors were behind their own curtains. The radio might be on, filling the kitchen with music, recipes, advertisements, cheerful voices, and little bursts of company that did not ask anything back. The radio matters here. For many women, it was part appliance, part companion, and part window into a world that still expected them to stay near the sink. A voice could enter the kitchen while she wiped a counter or folded towels, and for a little while, the room might feel less empty. There might be a recipe, a song, a household tip, or a commercial promising easier floors, brighter whites, calmer nerves, and a life that sounded very close to hers except with the rough edges sanded down. That could be comforting. It could also be lonely in a sharper way. Because the cheerful voice never saw the tired woman listening. It never saw the water cooling in the dishpan. It never saw her pause with one hand on the table, not quite sitting, not quite working, caught in the strange middle place where rest felt almost disobedient. This kind of domestic exhaustion does not photograph well. The hesitation. The cup of coffee gone lukewarm because the moment to drink it properly disappeared. The decision to keep moving because if she sat down now, standing up again might feel harder. And in that pocket of time, she might have been surrounded by the evidence of everyone else's life. The cereal bowl, the school paper, the damp towel, the husband's jacket, the crumbs under the chair, the grocery list, the clock. It is one thing to be tired while people are asking for you. It is another thing to be tired in a quiet house, surrounded by tasks that speak without voices. Because soon there will be footsteps. Children coming back from school. A husband returning from work. Dinner needing to become real. The emotional temperature of the house needing to be managed before anyone even names it. The 1950s wife was often expected to be a kind of domestic weather system, quietly regulating the mood of the home. She was supposed to make the house pleasant to return to, not just clean. Pleasant, warm, orderly, attractive, calm. If her husband had a difficult day, she should not meet him with her own difficulties too quickly. If the children were noisy, she should settle them. If she was tired, she should not let tiredness become the first thing anyone encountered. This is emotional labor before most people had a name for it, and it gathers in the body. It gathers in the jaw, in the shoulders, in the way a person smiles before they know whether they mean it. Dinner was the central ceremony, not always fancy, not always elaborate, but important. A plate of meat and potatoes, a casserole, a gelatin salad with something suspended inside it, vegetables from a can or freezer, bread, coffee, dessert if the day had enough room for it. The evening meal was supposed to gather the family and prove that the household had a rhythm. But before it became togetherness, it was labor. The chopping, the opening of cans, the pan on the burner, the oven door, the timer, the table setting, the child's question, the phone ringing, the apron, the steam, the little burn on a finger, the adjustment when something cooks too fast or not fast enough, the remembering of who dislikes onions, who needs more milk, who has homework, who is in a mood, who must not be disturbed. And then came the performance of eating together. The table was more than a table. It was the small evening stage where the family showed itself to itself, plates in their places, napkins folded or at least present, a serving dish in the middle, a glass of milk near a child's hand, the husband's chair waiting with a kind of quiet authority that no one needed to explain. If dinner went well, it could feel warm. There could be laughter, ordinary conversation, children telling small stories badly, and the comfort of everyone gathered under one light. But even warmth can require management. Someone had to notice when a child was about to spill. Someone had to smooth over irritation. Someone had to keep the meal moving, keep the plates filled, keep the mood pleasant, and decide whether her own tiredness belonged at the table at all. The housewife could be seated and still on duty. She could be eating and still serving, smiling and still measuring the room, listening for tension in a voice, for boredom in a child, for disappointment in the silence after the first bite. That is a very quiet kind of alertness. And alertness, even soft alertness, is not rest. And after dinner, the kitchen returned. The plates, the glasses, the silverware, the pan with something stuck to the bottom, the table wiped again, the leftovers covered, the floor checked again, the counters made neutral again, as if nothing had happened there. This is why the perfect 1950s housewife was always tired. Not because every single task was impossible, because nothing stayed finished. The work had no clean ending. And still, she was supposed to end the day attractively. There is a whole strange world inside the beauty expectations of the time. The curled hair, the lipstick, the powders and creams, the idea that a wife should remain appealing inside the home, even when she was not leaving it. The pleasant face, the controlled body, the respectable dress, the careful refusal to look as overwhelmed as she might feel. Beauty could be pleasure. It could be creativity. It could be a small private ritual in a bathroom mirror, but it could also become another room in the house that had to be kept clean. The self as a room, the face as a surface, the body as a project, the mood as part of the decor, and somewhere under all of that, a real person. Maybe she loved her children. Maybe she loved her husband. Maybe she liked the house, the curtains, the recipes, the pride of a shining table. Maybe she also had moments where she stood alone by the sink and felt a kind of wordless fatigue that did not fit the magazines at all. That is the part we are trying to notice quietly, not to flatten her life into misery, not to laugh at the pink appliances or the strange recipes or the perfect aprons, but to understand the pressure hidden inside the prettiness, because the 1950s home was more than a home. It was a performance of stability after years of instability. It was a promise that the world could be made orderly again if everyone played the right role. The husband would work, the wife would keep house, the children would grow, the lawn would be trimmed, The refrigerator would be full. The neighbors would wave. The curtains would close at night over a family that looked exactly as it was supposed to look. But people are not as tidy as the roles built for them. And exhaustion has a way of seeping through even the cleanest walls. By evening, the living room might glow softly, a lamp beside a chair, a television murmuring, the children quieter now, the dishes done or mostly done, the kitchen light turned off, the floor holding the faint smell of wax or cleanser. The whole house arranged into the peaceful image it had been working toward since morning. From the outside, through the window, it might look perfect, a small square of golden light, a family inside, a woman sitting down at last. But even sitting down might not mean rest. She might be mending something, folding something, listening for the dryer, thinking about tomorrow's breakfast, remembering that a child needs something for school, planning the grocery list again, noticing dust on a table she has already dusted, wondering if she has been patient enough, pleasant enough, pretty enough, efficient enough. The day closes, but the standard does not. And this is where the story becomes useful for us, lying here decades later, far from that kitchen and that supermarket and that ironing board. Because most of us still know some version of this. The feeling that life has become a set of invisible tasks. The feeling that comfort requires maintenance. The feeling that you are supposed to be grateful and tired at the same time. The feeling that everyone else sees the clean surface but not the small private effort underneath it. So perhaps the perfect 1950s housewife was not tired only because she cooked and cleaned and shopped and ironed. She was tired because she had to make all of that look like fulfillment. She was tired because the culture gave her better appliances but not always more permission to stop. She was tired because the home was treated as her natural place, and natural things are rarely thanked. She was tired because every room asked something of her. The kitchen asked for competence, the laundry room asked for endurance, the bedroom asked for neatness, the bathroom asked for freshness, the living room asked for taste, the front porch asked for respectability, the mirror asked for composure, and the evening asked her to do it all again tomorrow. There is something almost dreamlike about imagining those suburban houses now, lined up under the soft dark, each one holding its own version of the same quiet routine. One woman rinsing a glass, another folding a shirt, another brushing crumbs from a table, another sitting on the edge of a bed for just a few seconds longer than necessary, listening to the house settle around her. Not dramatic, not historic in the way textbooks usually mean historic, but deeply human. The past is often strangest when it is not extraordinary at all, when it is just a woman in a clean kitchen after a long day with the clock moving toward morning again. So, as we leave her there for tonight, in that soft square of lamplight, maybe we can let the image become quiet. The refrigerator hums, the sink is empty, the table is wiped clean. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's porch light clicks off, and inside, the perfect house rests for a few hours, not because it is finished, but because the woman who keeps it alive has finally stopped moving. At least for now.